Well, the Suicide Squad dropped last week. Day and date once again for HBO Max on their streaming service and in theaters. And this time, I think this was the most painful outing that Warner Media has had yet to date with this movie, The Suicide Squad. We're going to talk about this. We've got some Samba TV information and data to cover. Stick around. We'll be right back. All right, so Suicide Squad, or The Suicide Squad, came out. Of course, the original Suicide Squad was back about 5 years ago now, and even though the movie was an absolute, my opinion, dumpster fire of a mess that I didn't even want to see in the theaters, it was nothing appealing to me. I'm not really that big of a DC guy. That's just my personal opinion. I don't begrudge you if you enjoyed it. Good on you. But I did finally see it probably a couple of years later. I picked it up out of a $5 Blu-ray bin on Black Friday at Target. It came out of the case once. It went in the DVD player once. It went back in the case, and that was the end of it. Just was one of the more just confusing. It wasn't a terribly fun film for me. So we got this new one coming out. They try to reboot it. So we're going to talk about that. Before we do, please make sure you hit the like and subscribe button. Make sure you've got that notification bell checked. Please do share out the video. That really helps with the YouTube metrics. And thank you guys so much for being here. The channel is growing. That's in large part to you. And I thank you very much. So let's talk about this. So the box office came out. This is one of the most lackluster box offices that I think we've had all year, especially for a big budget popcorn action movie, especially a superhero based movie. I know the Suicide Squad is not like a headline, even for DC, let alone Marvel kind of movie, but it is still a $185 to $200 million production budget film. This is not small potatoes. 26 million. 26 million domestic opening, raked in about another 45 mil international box office. Very, very poor showing. And as we discussed in previous videos, this is part and parcel for releasing day and date on a streaming service, especially when, unlike Disney on Premier Access, HBO Max is not even charging a premium to watch these films. And as I later posited, I said, maybe this is going to work for HBO Max, taking the short-term loss for the long-term gain. That's possible, but the jury's still out on that. Of course, this movie doesn't lend itself to that very well at all. When you do this, when you want to release these kind of movies to the audiences to try to boost subscribership on HBO Max, this is not the movie I think that probably really did anything more for HBO Max than was already the natural subscriber growth that they've had, which has been a good, slow, steady subscriber growth. About 2.5 million new subs each fiscal quarter is what we've been looking at so far this year, and they've had some good movies to plod that along. But here's the thing. We want to look at numbers here, right? We want to see what was the actual effect, what was the real effect that the day-and-date streaming release on HBO Max would have had on actual theatrical box office revenues. Well, again, as always, fortunately, we have folks like Samba TV who track pretty much all of these streaming services, with the exception, of course, of Netflix, because Netflix has licensing agreements that bars and prohibits tracking their streaming service with third-party apps like Samba. So Netflix is out of that. But for HBO Max and Disney Plus, they're all on fair game. So we can see here, we just talked about this. Let's pop over to here. Samba has released their numbers. This was about 24 hours ago. Didn't get a chance to do this video yesterday. Although if you caught me Sunday evening on the Pop Culture Breakdown with my good buddy, Dictor Van Doomcock, over on Overlord DVD on YouTube, we were talking about this. And at the time Sunday, I had this number here, 363,000 U.S. households, HBO Max subscribers that would be. Watch The Suicide Squad on Thursday last week. That would have been the same night as the Thursday preview premiere in the theaters. Well, the Thursday night previews for The Suicide Squad got about 3.8 to 4 billion, or excuse me, 4 million, right in that neighborhood, at 363,000 U.S. households. If we just assume one $10.50 average 2021 pricing movie ticket would have been sold in lieu of watching it for free on HBO Max had it not been released day and date, we can assume that that Thursday night preview would have almost doubled. Now, if we take the U.S. household average of around 2.3, between 2 and 3 people per household, if we just assume 2 tickets were sold, you see where this is going. The Thursday night previews would have been much stronger. Now, I don't think it would have been that high, but I think taking 1 ticket at least per U.S. household is a reasonable assumption to say that, they might have had another $3 to $4 million in sales that night. And then yesterday we got the entire weekend numbers. 2.8 million U.S. household watched Suicide Squad during its initial release and first weekend. That's a big number. That's one of the biggest numbers for any of these day and date release streaming films that Samba has ever pulled. So I don't recall if it's quite the biggest, but it's definitely up there. It's definitely up there. And that would suggest another, if we take $10.50 and we figure 2.3 people per household, well, that's $67,006,220 box office dollars that they walked away from in that example. Now, again, if we can back it down to 2 or maybe 1.5 people, still, when you're talking about all they managed to do was rake in $26 million domestic, and we're talking about, in this case, another 2.8 million households just in the U.S. That's not foreign. And HBO Max is not as wide out there as is Disney Plus and some of these other streaming services like Netflix, but they do have some presence. But again, this is one of those things. And the movie was pretty good. I enjoyed the movie much better than I did the first one. It wasn't great, my opinion, but it was definitely a more solid film than the first one. It was more enjoyable. It had some humor in it. It's James Gunn has this knack. They wanted the guy that did Guardians of the Galaxy to do this new reboot of The Suicide Squad. Now, the problem is the original movie had so much stink on it. I honestly still, to this day, I can't figure out how it wound up making $750 million global box office like it did. I really, really don't. The fact that it beat out even Justice League was incredible. It must have been all just to see, Margot Robbie in there. So then I would think. Who knows? So anyway, this is kind of fascinating to me. So this is something that, we kind of need to keep an eye on because, again, I don't see this being able to hold long term. Because if we look here, this is what HBO Max has coming up for the rest of the year. Space Jam, which was a turd. Suicide Squad, we have, I don't know what Reminiscence or Malignant is. It's a James Wan movie, so that'll probably do pretty good. Most of those horror movies, low budget, high ROI, high return on investment. But if we go down here, Dune, right here, on October 22nd will be a day-and-date release. I think still this is a massive mistake for Warner to do this. And Matrix, right down here, December 22nd, another, I think, big mistake to do day-and-date release. Now, of course, this does not take into account what effects we may have if the lockdowns come back. Certainly that is a potential. So we need to be cognizant of that. But as for right now, I think some of the stories coming out suggesting that Suicide Squad had a bad weekend because of rising fears of a certain bug that's been going around that we've been dealing with. I'm sorry. I don't think that's what kept people away. And I think there's other movies coming up that, even later in the year, provided that theaters will continue to be open and be able to maintain at least a reasonable capacity level and create more showings to show these movies like Dune, I think people are going to turn out. Now, I think this is an excuse being set up as well because we have some forthcoming bombs coming up from Disney, namely Shang-Chi and the Eternals later on, which nobody seems to give a damn about. And I think they'll use that as an excuse as well. I think Disney will shift gears probably before September, and we might see Shang-Chi on Disney Plus, even though they don't plan to now. Same thing with the Eternals. So we'll see. Again, This is just me. I think this was a mistake. This movie should have done a lot better. I think Warner Media had kind of shot themselves in the foot making this decision. The reviews have been largely positive on this, and I can see why. So anyway, leave your thoughts, your comments below. Love to hear what you have to say. And again, make sure you're liked, subscribed, share the video out, hit that notification bell, and until next time, take care.